Hey everybody, Evan Nathaniel Grimm here. I'm going to talk about November 2022 for all 12 rising signs. As I'm going through this forecast, you want to focus on the rising sign first, and then also look at your sun and moon, because they may also be relevant for you and resonant. I'm going to share my screen in a second, but just to start off, November is really divided into two halves. The first half is really focused on the solar and lunar eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus. So we had the solar eclipse at the end of October, but now we're still crescendoing up to the lunar eclipse in Taurus, which actually looks a little bit more active and dynamic. So you're going to want to watch out for that. And then we eventually have a Sagittarius new moon on November 23rd. And that's going to bring up and highlight a lot of the mutable energies with like Gemini, Pisces, and Sag. I'm going to talk through all of that, but to just kind of dig in a little bit further into the details of November. So number one, we have this Taurus lunar eclipse. And what I really see here is like with the Scorpio solar eclipse, you really wanted to let go of something in your relationship life, or maybe even in your financial life. But I think with Scorpio, oftentimes it's about letting go of grudges when the South Node is there. So letting go of grudges, paranoia, obsession, fixations on certain things. It's almost like, what do you have to let go of in order to make these very radically new relationships work for you? Because when the lunar eclipse happens, I do think a lot of you will have a chance to take a radically new direction in love and career. Meanwhile, I do have Jupiter retrograding back into Pisces, which kind of means that we are falling back into a state of maybe bliss and sometimes confusion. I also do think the media and what's being said in the media will be highlighted here, where it's going to be very difficult for people to discern what's really being said and what's really going on. But anytime Jupiter falls back into Pisces here, it's gonna kind of conjure these themes that were present in like April and even early May, which is these impulses and urges to withdraw from reality, to escape, which can make things very difficult because we have Mars retrograde as well. We have Mars retrograde squaring Neptune, which is kind of about delusional thinking in a lot of ways, but also being tired of the information we're receiving, being tired of not knowing what is true or what is not. And we also have Saturn and Pluto direct this month, which means that karma is quickly unfolding. Saturn and Pluto have very karmic energies to them, but they're both direct. So there's a lot of there. On the one hand, there is some positive momentum for everybody here in the sense of like, even though amid this confusion, hopefully you're still anchored and grounded in a few, like 2 or 3 long-term aspirations that you want to work towards with Saturn. However, again, with Mars retrograde, it's like we might not have access to our immediate energy. And then eventually, this Jupiter Neptune conjunction will trine, Sun, Mercury, and Venus in Scorpio later this month. And that's almost like visionary thinking. It's very hot, like there's a strong imagination there. And then eventually we have a mutable T square, like I said, between Sag, Gemini, and Pisces, which is kind of about misdirected passions, anger, and even like some, I think it's just like manipulation, even in a lot of ways. But finally, we do have Saturn squaring on the eclipse, squaring Mercury, the Sun, Venus, Moon, Uranus, and the nodes. So I think like the net of this month, I think like the heart of this month is really that lunar eclipse, where we're kind of facing some gridlock, stress tests on relationships, some issues with contracts, and even like the leadership, at all institutional levels, like the leadership, whether that's governmental or corporate, the leadership having to face a series of tests. So anyways, I'm going to share my screen here so you can see what exactly is going on. So we're talking about, really what I'm highlighting here is the eclipse energy. So we are, sorry, let me back out of this screen size. So we are really focusing on the November 8th eclipse, but I'm also going to apply what's happening in late November for everybody. So let's start off with Aries. Let's start off with Aries rising. So what exactly is occurring for Aries rising? Well, you had the Scorpio solar eclipse in your 8th house, the Taurus lunar eclipse in the 2nd house. So let's unpack that first. So what Aries rising is going through here is it's definitely financial. When you're talking about the 8th house and the 2nd house, that has a financial component. And it's either that you are maybe divesting from something, letting go of certain assets, or even coming upon a new income stream. But I think when the South Node is in the eighth house, it's like you may be letting go of some type of asset that you don't need anymore. Like maybe there's an investment that you want to sell off, or there's just some sort of something that used to be an asset that's now a liability, basically. But either way, the Scorpio lunar or solar eclipse was theoretically a revelation or a new beginning around how you want to navigate your relationships, the types of people you were even like wanting to be around, your associations, and again, with Venus in the eighth house, though, that can have a financial lens. But in the eighth house, it could even be about there was a relationship or some relationships which really forced you to reckon with some deep-seated fears and to let go of certain grudges, but like grudges that are, very tied, like very triggering for you and just very tied to the subconscious. But hopefully the solar eclipse actually allowed you to like release some of that pressure and intensity. And now on November 8th here with the solar eclipse, or sorry, the lunar eclipse in the second house, this could be a radically different monetization strategy. This could be about, focusing on maybe even like what you value. So maybe there's a different value system that you create that opens a new financial opportunity where it's like you realize I care a lot more about preserving Mother Nature, and like somehow that leads you to like a job that you really want. So if I were you as an Aries rising, I would really focus on your value systems and how that affects the type of financial situations you are pursuing and in careers. But also you have Saturn bending these nodes and this Scorpio Taurus energy in Aquarius in the 11th. So Saturn is kind of in the middle of this, saying, forcing a bit of a compromise, because Uranus wants to pull you into a radically new direction, and the Scorpio stuff sometimes wants to stay put. But Uranus opposing Mercury and Venus, like I said, that's a radical reinvention of either your values, your relationships, your career, or even the way you just think. There's a quantum leap in awareness, maybe. But then with Saturn in the 11th house in the middle, it's almost saying like, okay, you have responsibilities though over maybe certain communities, or there's friend groups, or there's social groups, or there's online communities that are depending on you. And so maybe those obligations are affecting somehow, they're affecting your financial picture, or they're affecting the relationships you want. So you have to you have to heed the call of those social groups of like, what exactly is your responsibility there? So if they need you to manage a formal group financially, then you have to do that here. Or if there's a social media presence that you have that's somehow distracting or even maybe helping your financial situation, you want to think about this. Like, what are the connections here between the communities I belong to, myself, maybe whether it's social media or in person, and my financial aspirations? And then again, maybe even there is a connection between these social groups, these broader networks, and a more significant relationship that comes out of that. But again, Saturn is squaring the Venus Mercury energy and squaring Uranus. So there's a push-pull here between like wanting to liberate yourself and wanting to jump into new connections and relationships, but also Saturn here like forcing you to still keep a handle on your existing responsibilities. So that's the crossroads for everybody here generally, is like just wanting to stay in place, but also because you feel maybe judged or like you have to, but also knowing eventually that you have the keys to your own liberation. So that's really the axis there for Aries rising. And then the Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions in the 12th house. So to me, that's like this expansiveness around your spiritual side. So maybe like getting more downloads when you meditate, but also feeling a little bit like escapist, like you're like lost a little bit too much in the dream world and you're too tempted by the dream world. So you want to keep yourself in a grounded position as much as possible here. And that's all squaring Mars in the third, and which is retrograde. So you're getting a little bit tired of like sending too many back and forth messages with people, a lot of which are very confusing. And you probably are just messaging people at the end of the night, and it's like really weird. So at the end of November, though, you're going to get an influx of Sagittarian energy in the 9th house. And that's all going to be opposing Mars, eventually squaring Neptune and Jupiter. So the end of November, you want to be very careful about what types of ideas and perspectives you're investing in educationally, and also what types of destinations you're traveling to. because I feel like there's something new, a new destination you want to climb towards, but there's someone here in the third house who's constantly just like pulling you away from that trip. They're distracting you. They're bickering with you over text or voicemail. Kind of want to disengage from that person because they're adding confusion for you. So anyways, let's move on to Taurus rising. So Taurus rising here. Let's jump ahead by an hour to get that. Yeah, so Taurus rising. Taurus rising, you had the eclipse in the seventh house and then the first house. So this is a pivot point in the relationship between yourself and others. So when the solar eclipse was occurring in the seventh house at the end of October, that was especially a realization around a type of relationship that you don't want to, you just can't hold on to anymore. You can't afford to hold on to it. There was a part of you that obsessed with it and wanted to hold on to that relationship, but eventually you realized you had to let it go. And so in its wake, in the ending of that relationship or that relationship that never happened, there is a part of you over here in the first house that's being illuminated on this lunar eclipse in November, of like, okay, well, was I making compromises to chase that relationship? Is there a more authentic, unique version of myself that I just have to embrace? It's like maybe I'm falling into these relationships that aren't right for me because I haven't embraced my authenticity. And that's a sort of a beautiful realization. If you're a Taurus rising, I think this lunar eclipse is, again, an illumination of like who you really are and your authentic nature. So and that authentic it can be quite radical. It can be unconventional. You can be a very original type of person. And it's kind of like, to hell with those other relationships, right? That were too conventional or something. But that being said, you do have a lot of placements in the seventh house right now. So the focus is on who do you want to connect with on a close level, whether that's romantically, professionally, or even just as friends. And then you have Saturn squaring this all, forming a T-square with all this in the 10th house, which means there's a clash here, right? There's a fight between, there are responsibilities in your career you're feeling the pressure, right, to succeed in your career and to manifest things, but your relationships are a source of like almost pain right now, honestly. Like I feel like your relationships are a little bit painful, but again, you have to let go of some of those relationships to find your true self in the middle of that. And then Mars retrograde in the second kind of means that you have been trying really hard to monetize and make money, build your own confidence up, sense of self-worth. You've been motivated to invest in yourself, your natural talents. Like that's a good time. I mean, generally, but when Mars retrogrades in the second house, it's like maybe you need to take a back seat and take a break. Maybe you've been obsessing a little too hard over like earning money off of communication with Mars Gemini. Maybe you've been, attaching almost too much of your ego to your earnings. Mars can be very egoic. So when Mars retrogrades, it's almost like you want to reevaluate and reassess, like, am I becoming too, am I brandishing my financial success like in a toxic way, or am I chasing money to the detriment of my health or my energy? You know what I mean? So you want to just kind of like relax here and like rethink some of the conversations you've had or decisions you've made in which your values were compromised. Second house is values. So it's like, were your values compromised, and were they especially compromised in social situations? Because Jupiter Neptune is really in your 11th house here. And by the way, this clock face, kind of ignore it. I'm just using it as a rough reference point. Like I'm assuming kind of like a little bit more of like a whole sign system here, but I practice Placidus houses and like natal chart readings, but for the sake of like, global forecasts, I'm kind of assuming a lot of Taurus risings will have Pisces in the 11th house, but for some of you, it is in the 12th house, this conjunction. But let's assume it's in the 11th house. So that means that there is a lot of confusion in your friend groups and social situations this month, where you're almost like revisiting some deceptive moments from earlier in the year. Like maybe there was a friend who you realize was deceiving you, manipulating you. And then you realize the ways in which you compromised your values to make some of these friends, work for you. So, you have to, as a Taurus rising, really, really get clear on your values and how are they aligned or misaligned with the people in your life. and what you're seeking. So if you value money to the detriment of a bunch of other things like time with your friends or time with your family, like you want to reevaluate that. Or if you don't value money enough, like this would be a time to think about that. And eventually your Sag energy in later November will come into the 8th house. So all of a sudden in late November, you are actually quite focused on taking more risks in your financial life, I think, and like maybe making some financially impulsive decisions. So you want to be very cautious about that. I think there could be a friend in the 11th house who like tries to convince you to invest in something at the end of November erroneously, or don't be misguided by a friend there. Really think through your financial choices there. So this is, again, all the more reason in the early part of the month to rethink your value systems. So on to Gemini rising. Gemini rising, you have before I even get into the eclipses, I want to talk about the fact that Mars is retrograde in your first house. So as Gemini rising, since August, you've been taking chances, you've been demonstrating some assertiveness and leadership, but you've also been very impulsive and like reaching out to people that, you don't really need to reach out to. A lot of Gemini risings are just sending text messages and messages to people on social who they barely know, and just like being a little too forward, like if you're a Gemini rising, you kind of have to dial it back a little bit, especially during this Mars retrograde. So November is basically like, let me rethink and all the conversations I regret. There's some regret here. I'm not saying it's all bad though, because like Mars in the first, ultimately the strength is yours. You have a lot of strength, a lot of vitality, but I do think you made some miscalculations in August and September and October that you're trying to work through right now. So Geminis, you need to go inward a little bit here for once in this transit, because you've been pushing out. When Mars is in the first, you're pushing out, you're taking chances. But now you want to rethink, okay, why did I make that person feel agitated? Like reflect on that. Now these eclipses are in your 6th house and 12th house. So that was like a bit of a reset in your work routines in the beginning or the late October period. And maybe letting go of a certain work relationship that was complicated for you. But now you're clearing space for this lunar eclipse, which is like a radical new vision of spirituality, or thinking about your life from a more abstract, transcendental vantage point. I think Gemini risings could have like a spiritual awakening. Some of them could, because Gemini risings are usually very cerebral and not all that interested in things like astrology. But with that lunar eclipse in the 12th, there could be suddenly an angle from which you maybe believe in spirituality, or you find value in astrology, or you have a dream that just like changes your perspective on things, or you get a major creative download through a dream. And then at the same time, many of you will have Jupiter and Neptune in the 10th, which is also creating this weird opening where it's like, I don't feel like my career is fulfilling enough. Like I want it to go higher. How can I go higher in my career? And that Uranus conjunction with the moon in the North Node is pointing that way. And it's giving you a temporary opening to chase something more transcendental and enlightening. So Gemini risings are kind of having like a crisis of belief, a paradigm shift, and not a bad crisis. Like it's almost like it's a reset on your connection with the divine, or maybe your first connection with the divine. And that might inspire you to chase a career as a healer in some way. Or it might make you want to inspire others, like to convey that message that you received in your dream or spiritually. So Gemini, allow the spiritual downloads to come in, and I think it will lead to good things. It will lead to very amazing epiphanies. Now, at the end of November, you do have a lot of 7th house activity with Sag, and that will be opposing Mars. So you have the 1st, 7th, and 10th houses activated at the end of November. I mean, I'm not going to lie, that's a little bit confusing. So I think at the end of November, there are a lot of disputes erupting between yourself and your close friends and partners. And maybe they are judging you for your change of heart and for your more, creative, imaginative perspective on things. So basically, like, entertain the spiritual. And even if you're already spiritual, I think there's something more waiting for you here. But don't let the naysayers get under your skin at the end of November. So moving on to Cancer rising. So moving on to Cancer rising, you had the Scorpio solar eclipse in your 5th house, which is really the domain of creativity. So for a lot of Cancer risings, you felt like being more creative, investing in your creative side, rethinking how you should create, being motivated to be seen, whether that's on camera or on stage or in a song or in a play or in a film. Cancer risings also maybe want to go on dates. Cancer risings have this motivation right now to go on dates with people as well. So it's like whether it's creating or going on dates or investing in your romantic side, Cancer risings really want to feel like they have that inner flame. They have a hold of that inner joy. Maybe some Cancer risings are going out to, they're just going out more. They're just playing outside more, just feeling like youthful. And then that Taurus lunar eclipse in the 11th means there's also an impact on your social media life. In mid-November. There's something radically different about your social media presence or your presence in a friend group. Maybe there's a new community that you rush into, you jump into. There's an opportunity there to join a new community in a way that impacts your mindsets or even your financial picture or your relationships. But again, I think there's a social media domain to this. So it's like maybe you adopt a new content format. Especially with the 5th house being about creativity. So I think Cancer risings need to entertain. How do they create? How do you create things? Whether it's movies or songs or plays or social media content. Cancer risings are feeling really creative right now. But at the same time, your sleep is not all that great because you have Mars retrograde in the 12th. So you need to re-regulate your sleep cycle, your circadian rhythm, so that you can be at your best when you're creating. And some of these exciting opportunities socially are taking you away from your shadow work with Mars or with Saturn in the 8th. So Saturn in the 8th has been there. It's been there for a while. And that's been very intense because it's been forcing you to reckon with deep-seated fears. But Uranus in the 11th is like, come over here into the social situation and enjoy the presence of other people. Enjoy the community, right? And that excitement, that electrification of your social life might be a little distracting. It might take you away from the harsh lessons that Saturn is teaching you and has been teaching you in the 8th house. So at the end, though, Jupiter in the 9th means that maybe there's a travel opportunity here, and there's a trip that you might take that's enlightening in some way. Now, at the end of November, you have Sag in the 6th, which is really, highlighting maybe some analytical sides of your life, skill sets that you want to invest in, and maybe somehow incorporating that into your creative or spiritual side in the 12th. So I think there might be like a trip here in November that just like opens you up to new perspectives. And maybe there's even conversations here with people who are quite learned in certain disciplines. So maybe it's like an analytical form of spirituality. Like you're coming up with a way to analyze something very esoteric in a cool way. But again, your responsibilities are still in the 8th house, which is about business, investments, assets, and shadow work. So make sure that you give yourself some time to do the shadow work as you're creating. Now we move on to Leo. So Leo, you have the eclipse in the 4th and the 10th. So I think Leos are making major transitions right now in their home life and their career. So a lot of Leo risings are leaving behind careers that are very stagnant and stifling. And you're replacing that with something more exciting and electrifying with Uranus, something more technological and innovative. So a lot of Leo risings may be starting a new job this month or leaving an old job, or moving again. And maybe as a Leo rising, maybe you entertain people at your home and you meet someone through that experience somehow, like a friend brings a friend. That could be a scenario. And you're looking for some kind of close connection because Saturn in the 7th is tough. I mean, Saturn in the 7th leaves you feeling alienated and isolated from some close confidants. So you're looking to replace that with maybe new connections that you find through your family, through your home, through your neighbors. Well, not really neighbors, but through your home, and then maybe even in your career. because your career is going to get more exciting, I think, in mid-November. Now, in later November, you shift into the 5th house, and that's highlighting this Mars opposition in the 11th. So in the end of November, I think you are focusing on your creative life a little bit more. So ideally in the first half of November, you're ironing out what's going on with my career and my home. So I'm making space for my more kind of the fun side of my life at the end of November. And with Mars in the 11th, though, you have been socializing a lot, but in a very dispassionate, detached way. You have been socializing with like groups. Maybe you went to like a retreat, or you just like went to a networking event, but you're getting a little tired of that, all that mingling. And it feels like a little surface level in the 11th. So Leo risings, you are looking for a little bit more depth out of the people that you surround yourself with in your home life or your family. You're dealing with maybe people in your family. Maybe you're letting go certain grudges towards family members. And then in the 10th house, you're believing that there is a career out there that's agile and interesting enough for you. So chase that very technological or progressive or agile career. Now, you do have Neptune and Jupiter in the 8th, which is an expansive energy around your shadow side, your subconscious, psychoanalytic capabilities, psychological capabilities. So Leo risings, you are feeling an upsurge in intuition a little bit here, and an ability to really like hook into very sensitive, subtle energies. So like, maybe some of you can read minds all of a sudden, or you're just closer to that sort of side of yourself now. And that is actually helping you maybe connect with some of these groups on a deeper level. And it might be inspiring you to create new modalities. Maybe you're writing songs, maybe you're investing in new content creation. And with Mars in the 11th in retrograde, you've been talking a lot probably on social media, and you may be reevaluating some of the things you've said on social media. So a lot of Leo risings, I think a lot of Leo risings have been honestly kind of talking smack on social media, and maybe in subtle ways. So if you're like a small creator, or you're just an individual and you don't have like a content stream, maybe you've just been talking smack on direct messages or towards people. But if you're a bigger creator, you may have just been shit talking people. And so Mars retrograde is basically like, hang on, let's rethink a strat. Let's we'll find a new strategy here, because like all that like random insidious kind of behavior, it's not getting anywhere. So I think if you're a Leo rising, maybe some of the provocation was a good idea that like elevated your status somehow. But I think you're realizing that it's kind of a net negative in some ways. So it's like you just want to you want to sit with yourself there and be like, okay, how can I be more strategic in the way I communicate online? Can I be bring more people in and be more positive, or can I can I invite more people into my community by being positive? Because I think the Mars Gemini direct was like a little bit aggressive for Leo risings. So a lot of Leo risings wanted to conjure debates with a lot of people online. So now is the time to reevaluate. Getting into Virgo rising. Virgo rising, you have the eclipses in the 3rd and 9th house. And that's really about, your learning process. So maybe there's a new educational path you've wanted to invest in that you're ready to invest in. I think that could be, I think that that's really interesting. I think a lot, because here's why. Virgo risings have a lot of energy in their sort of work houses, we'll call it. So the 10th house and the 6th house are highly active right now with Gemini and Aquarius. So what that means is that Virgo risings have been like really put under a lot of pressure at work to like get the job done, to turn in the project on time. And as they do good work, because they're being pressured to do it, it's like as they hand in the assignment on time, like people are giving them even more responsibility with Mars in the 10th. And so Virgos are kind of tapped out. Virgos are burned out. Okay. And Virgos are looking for a new path. And that path is educational. So if you're a Virgo rising this month, you may be accepted into a new program, educational program. You may invest, get financial aid. You may, just suddenly want to chase a new educational path as a way to like literally get out of this corporate stuffy environment. And if you're not if you're not in a work setting, the sixth house is really just your day-to-day, whatever you're doing day to day. So if you're studying, right, and you're doing that every day, you're in school, this eclipse energy maybe just puts you on a new subject matter. It like gives you a new path. Like maybe you switch majors or something. But I think with Uranus in the ninth, it's like there's an more interesting technological subject you hadn't thought of that you're suddenly interested in, right? Like that could be it. Where it's like you want to invest in something that's very like pioneering. But you do still have Mars squaring the seventh house, Jupiter and Neptune energy, which is a little. It can be challenging. It can be challenging because that means there's a lot of confusion sometimes in your partnerships, your close relationships. So your partners, and again, close friends or maybe a romantic partner, I don't know if I trust their advice here that they're giving you. A lot of them are giving you some really weird advice. So I think you have to trust your own intellectual might, because it's, there's a new subject here that you're kind of hooking into, or maybe a trip that you're taking and that gives you that new perspective. Trust that, because that's the eclipse giving you a bit of a reset. And then the Sag energy at the end of November will highlight your home and family life. So I would actually see maybe some arguments with your family members at the end of November, maybe around Thanksgiving. You just want to be cautious during that time and maybe hold back from jumping into any and all arguments to save some energy there. Okay, so moving on to Libra. So Libra rising. The Scorpio eclipse is in your second house and eighth house with the Taurus lunar eclipse. There's inherently, again, just like Aries rising, a financial dimension to that. So you're reevaluating your investments, your assets, but also what it is you value. So the order of operations here is to think about, to audit your value system. So what do I value, and how does that impact the types of things I want to invest in, financially or otherwise? Uranus in the eighth conjunct, or with that moon conjunct Uranus on the eclipse, that could be an illumination of, that could be a sudden epiphany around some shadow work you've been doing of like, oh, this is who I really am, or these are the fears I have to face, or this is the memory that I've been chasing that I finally have access to. This is the memory from my early life that impacts all my behaviors, my coping mechanisms. So as a Libra rising, you have a chance to uproot your deepest, darkest emotions and fears. Maybe you would be divesting from something financially. Maybe there's suddenly like a financial windfall, though. I mean, it could be a financial windfall, but it could also be a big financial change in the other direction, where it's like suddenly you have to like cough up a bunch of money for some reason. But generally here, it's like the focus is definitely on money. I mean, this is your month to really figure out, like, how am I making my money? But again, do I even value money, or do I value other things? And then with Saturn bending these nodes in the fifth, it's like there's sort of like a way in which you're trying to monetize. There's a way in which you're trying to monetize your creative efforts, your creative side. And so maybe your creative work is either getting in the way of your financial aspirations, or it's actually helping, because the midpoint of that T-square with Saturn can actually be a helpful thing. So maybe you're manifesting creative works that actually help, that make you money. And then you also eventually have the Sag energy in the third, ninth, and sixth house, or the mutable energy in those houses later in November. To me, that's like a trip, maybe like a sudden trip you have to take that's like very hectic, and just like gets you off your routine. So just kind of like be okay with that. And by the way, something I didn't like fully explain with Virgo, Virgo, when you're going back to school, maybe if you're going back to school, that's actually for the purpose of like really firming up something analytical in your life. Because I just wanted to highlight that Saturn energy. And then, by the way, for Leo risings, Saturn's at the midpoint of this career change. So it's like maybe there's a career and home change, but there's like a partner here who's like acting as a stabilizing force. That's really interesting for Leo rising. So there's maybe like a partner that's acting as a stable foundation here to like help you realize, oh yeah, this is the career I really want. So just wanted to quickly jump back in and talk about that Saturn energy. So for Libra rising, Saturn is really firming up in this domain of the fifth house of like your creations and your creative side. So it's like anytime you're trying to manifest your creativity, I think that like somehow that like helps your financial aspirations out. So let's move on to Scorpio rising. Scorpio risings, you have the eclipses in the 1st and 7th. So just like Taurus risings, this is the domain, the relationship between you and other people. So Scorpio risings, you know, it's kind of like, what do you have to let go of about yourself? What toxic patterns do you have to let go of to make a relationship work? There's a relationship here in the 7th house that just doesn't work anymore because you're refusing to let go of certain patterns. And maybe that relationship isn't right for you. I'm not trying to say that it wasn't right for you anyways, but like a lot of Scorpio risings are going through breakups this month because Uranus conjunct that moon, that lunar eclipse. It's just like this unexpected event where you just change your mind about someone, or someone changes their mind about you, or you realize that someone is limiting you, or that someone wants too much freedom, where it's like they're too, you know, it's like they want to be liberated from you, or you want to be liberated from them. Like, but here's what really you have to do is you have to, again, like really be self-aware and think about like, what am I holding on to too tightly? Am I holding on to grudges from past relationships? Am I holding on to the worst moments from my past relationships in a way that's preventing me from growing in my current relationship? So either you have to change or your relationship has to change here, because one of them is limiting your progress and your evolution. So really about, and that's a tricky one, right? So just think about that. You know, everything I just said, really, it's a little nuanced, but you really want to think about, is it me or is it them? It's not clear here, but it's like somebody in the relationship is stifling the growth. If you're not in a relationship, this is just about like how you can grow generally through your close relationships by letting go of some toxic patterns. Now, Saturn is squaring this energy in the 4th, meaning that there are obligations in your home life that are preventing you from fully, you know, investing in this question that I just asked you about of you, is it you or is it them? So really make sure you have your home life in order. So if you're entertaining new roommates or you're moving or you have a roommate that's difficult or you have a family member that's difficult, that's just the nature of Saturn in the 4th. So you want to make sure that you balance out, that you don't let that prevent you from doing the shadow work. You don't let that prevent you from reflecting on the relationships that are beneficial and growth oriented for you. Jupiter conjunct Neptune in the 5th, though, can expand your creative side and your sense of creativity. But squaring Mars in the 8th, I want to really mention this, for double down. The Scorpio risings, you have Mars in the 8th. And that means that there are some desires here that like you maybe are taboo, or like, you know, you're not supposed to, like, that maybe step outside of your relationship. You have to ignore those temptations. Mars in the 8th either wants to kind of like engage in that stuff outside of your relationship, or it wants to engage in gossip. So Scorpio risings have to avoid gossip or you know, saying very subversive things to people, or even like stirring the pot in your, let's just call it your intimate life, you know, unnecessarily. You got to keep things like a little bit above board here. And at the end of November, I think that's all going to come to a head where it's like, maybe there is an impulsive action taken at the end of November where it's like you're acting on your physical desires, but like, I wouldn't really recommend doing that because I feel like you would regret that. And it's all squaring the Jupiter Pisces stuff. I feel like there's some type of like date that you're going on as Scorpio rising. Like maybe you're going on a date that's just like, you're just not talking about with people. That's like kind of secretive. It's behind closed doors. Look, I'm not a moralist here. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but if you're a Scorpio rising, there's just like temptations galore. And I don't know if you really want to invest in that, because the South Node in the 1st means you actually have to give up some of your toxic patterns. You have to give up this desire for secrecy or going behind people's backs or doing things that are subversive. So this is a tough month for you. I think Scorpio risings have a tough month here. They have a tough month because it's almost like all of their weaknesses are being held in front of them. And, you know, again, you don't really want to act on that per se. So moving on to Sag. This is in the 12th. The eclipses are in the 12th house and 6th house for you. So, there's an inherently spiritual dimension to that. Maybe there's a spiritual realization that you have, or you're letting go of a certain toxic habit. Maybe, like, honestly, some Sag risings are giving up like certain addictions, or like reliances on certain like substances, or like drinking. Like Sag rising is like, this is actually a time for you to like release some addictive behaviors and open a path for something more enlightening and transcendental, like maybe spirituality. And I think that that's illuminating the things that you want to do every day in the sixth house now, and your routines, and maybe even your health, and you're seeing how that impacted your health. I think that's a huge thing for Sag risings, or maybe how your even sleep patterns have been affecting your health. But again, in the sixth house, it can pertain to just like what you want to do for a living, for work. So maybe you're suddenly enlightened around like, oh, I actually want to do something that's a little bit more unique to me. Something that maybe incorporates my spiritual life. And then Saturn's in the third kind of parked here, saying, Saturn in the third is really about like testing your knowledge and firming a foundation around, like firming up a foundation in some knowledge base. So Saturn squaring these energies is like, you have responsibilities here in the third house. You have to teach people something, or you have to learn something, and you have to show up every day and talk about that thing, or learn about that thing, or communicate that thing to people in an orderly manner. So maybe you're being tested, you're taking exams, and you realize that you have to stop your addictive behaviors in the middle of the night. Like maybe at night, maybe you have to have a kind of a more monastic lifestyle all of a sudden to pass these exams, pass these tests, or to show up every day, and then eventually do something super unique. At the end of November, the new moon's in your first house, though. So maybe at the end of November, it's like a new you is being born. But at the same time, I think that Sag risings especially could get into some disputes and debates with some of their closest confidants in a way that's detrimental. And I think a lot of Sag rising, some of that conflict could stem from the home life. So it's like maybe there's like some confusing, like family members who are confusing you here, and it's just like causing agitation. So like basically, I'm not saying like don't trust your family, but I do think your family at the end of November is like Gemini risings, a source of debate here a little bit, and strain. Or maybe it was Virgo risings, I don't remember. But Sag risings, there's just like a general confusion right now in the fourth house here, where it's like maybe you're dealing with a family member who's addicted to something, and then you're saying like, hey, you should also clean up this behavior, and they're upset about it. Like I think maybe at the end of November, there's even like something around that. I think there's something around like how you escape or transcend, and versus someone in your family. Cap rising. So Cap rising, you have the solar eclipse in the 11th house, the Taurus lunar eclipse in the 5th. So Cap risings, maybe this was a new social media investment, a new investment in a community, or even being able to let go of a social media connection, or letting go of a friend, or letting go of a grudge that allows you to re-enter and re-emerge into a social community or a group. But then the lunar eclipse, I think, is interesting. That's in your 5th house of creativity. So I think that Cap risings, you could adopt a totally new creative process. So maybe if you're a social media creator, maybe you change up the videos that you do, or if you are a musician, you change up the types of songs that you write. Or if you're not necessarily an artist, it's just like there's something here that's illuminating like a really interesting creative side that you maybe didn't even have before. So if you're a Cap rising, you really do want to embrace new creative modalities and archetypes, or just types of creativity. And how do you have fun? The 5th house is about having fun. So maybe you're just finding new ways to have fun. Maybe you join like a recreational sports, intramural sports league or something. And for some Cap risings, though, a lot of Cap risings will have like a Scorpio midheaven. And I talked about this in October, and I forecasted this. Like a lot of Cap risings may have in October realize the true financial situation of like either their corporation that they work for, or their corporate partner. So if you work with a company in like branded advertising, you may have like suddenly realized, oh, this is their true financial situation. Or if you work for a company, Maybe the company said we're paring back our bonuses or our raises. Like there's something for Cap risings in October where it's like there was like a revelation around like the true financial underpinnings of a company that you're working with or for. But for others, it is in that 11th house. So it's a little bit more about just like the either financial benefits that you're gaining from a community, maybe the financial management and ownership of a community or a group or an organization. But again, I want to highlight for a lot of you that Uranus conjunctions in the 5th house of creativity. So that is the birth of an alternative approach to your creative side. For some of you, though, that will be in the 4th house, which is a sort of maybe an inner restlessness or a sudden need to move homes or something. Now, Mars retrograde in the 6th house, you're reevaluating your day-to-day rituals and routines. You've probably been very organized or motivated to like do the same thing every day and have a routine lately with Mars in the 6th, but that's been like causing a little burnout. So you want to reevaluate, like, or maybe you haven't been orderly at all, because Mars Gemini can be kind of chaotic actually. So let me reverse that. I think for the most part, Cap risings, if you have Mars in the 6th and Gemini, things have just been like haywire and hectic and chaotic for you. So now your Mars retrograde is a chance for you to reorganize your day-to-day. So if you're a Cap rising, think about what you do beginning, middle, and end of each day. Like, can I optimize? Can I tweak when I have breakfast, when I have lunch, when I go exercising, whatever? And that's squaring this energy eventually of Sag in the 12th house and Pisces in the 3rd. So there's a little bit of confusion and exhaustion around like having to keep up with people, having to communicate with people in the 3rd. And then at the end of November, suddenly there's a highlighting of your spiritual side, or maybe your need for sleep, your need for inner reflection and isolation and just time alone. But it almost feels like people won't leave you be through that 3rd house. Like they're sending you a lot of confusing messages and you just want a break from it. So if you're a Cap rising, maybe ask for some PTO, ask for some reflective time. I think you really need it. I think you've been burning yourself out with that Mars on the 6th. Like you've been working a lot, but you haven't had a clear process. So reprocess your work routine. So Aquarius rising, the eclipses are in the 10th and 4th. So Aquarius risings as well, like Cap risings, there could be a revelation around the true financial situation, again, of a corporation you either work for or with. But a lot of Aquarius risings have been letting go of grudges, maybe towards a parent or an authority figure, or you've been letting go of a sort of anxiety that you felt in your career. You know, a lot of Aquarius risings, maybe with all the Scorpio in the 10th, it's like maybe you've been feeling anxious about your career, or with Scorpio being about finance, maybe you're making more money. Maybe some Aquarius risings have stumbled into a very interesting financial situation. For others, maybe you know, it's almost like you realize that you want to kind of like let go, like you're just on the wrong career path. You know, some of you might realize that, like, I need to just let go. I've been holding on, because Scorpio's a very stubborn sign. It's like, I want to hold on, but the South Node eventually is telling you, please just like reflect and release. For other Aquarius risings, some of this energy is in the 9th house, which means that you're maybe going into more debt, like I said in October, to invest in like some educational path, to learn more. But also maybe to realize the limited, maybe you had a worldview that you realized was kind of limited. Once you dig into the depths of a new subject, you realize, oh my God, there's so much more about the world that I didn't know. But in general, I think, you know, with Aquarius, you're going to have this in the 10th house. So it's like you're letting go of a relationship or a grudge towards an authority figure, or you're rethinking the type of career that you want, or you're asking for more money in a career, you're asking for a promotion. Like there could be a lot of things here. That full moon is in the 4th. So there's a way in which, kind of like Leo risings, you're basically grappling with, how do I make space for a career that's authentic to me? But in your case with Aquarius rising, with Uranus in the 4th, it's almost like, is there a family member that is actually like very illuminating for me? Like, is there a family member or a lineage that I'm suddenly aware of in my ancestry that's like very exciting to me? Maybe there's a conversation with a family member that you know, really puts you on gives you a new perspective about your career and what your career should be. But as you're debating these topics, Saturn's in the 1st house saying, you know, hang on here. Like you have responsibilities to really build your own sense of self again. You're starting over with Saturn first. So you're really thinking about, like, you're having a bit of an identity crisis if you're Aquarius rising. You're having an identity crisis, and so I think it's like causing you to realize, you know, but I think a family member might be helping you work through it, or a family member is making you realize what you really don't want to be doing, and somehow that connects back to your career, where it's like, okay, if I really know, even if I'm having an identity crisis, it's like if I know that I'm not, definitely not this person, then maybe that's helpful in delineating the career that I want. So your responsibilities towards yourself come first. So Saturn the first is what you have to tend to first. So you really want to firm up your identity, ground yourself in in who you are, because you're at the tail end of that Saturn transit in the first. So it's like you are definitely at a moment here where it's like, you know, Saturn's going to be in Pisces by March. So this is your time to really move forward on some maybe long-term plans around what you want to do, and reflect that in your career by letting go of the career you don't need, or learning the subject that you really need to learn to gain that depth that will serve your new sense of self. And maybe it's in the third for you, this Uranus energy, which would be like a radical new level of awareness around a certain subject where you just get this epiphany. So I think that's interesting. And then for a lot of you, Mars in the fifth, you're reevaluating a lot of the dates you've been going on. Maybe you're picking someone to be an actual partner, or you're just revisiting and going on a second or third date with some of these people. It's squaring this energy in the second, which means that some of these dates, to make some of these dates work, you've maybe had to compromise some of your values. So you don't want to do that. You really don't want to do that here. So you want to continue to do what I said in October, which is to like really focus on like, what is it that I value? And how does that intermix or clash with the people that I've been inviting into my life through these dates? And then Sag will be in your 11th house at the end of November, maybe even in your 10th house for some of you. But I think for most of you, Sag in the 11th is going to highlight the social groups that you belong to. So maybe some of these dates that you've been going on, like, give you an entry into a new friend group, or there's a new friend group at the end of November that you end up like going on a date with them, or maybe you already knew them and you finally actually go on a date with them. So that I think that, you know, that's interesting. But also Aquarius risings, if you're like, I'm not going on dates at all, then this is really just a reevaluation of your creative process and what you've been working on there. And I want to back up really quick, just to highlight something for Cap risings. So as you're a Cap rising going through like maybe this financial, familial, home versus career kind of dynamic, Saturn is still in your second house. Ignore this house system here, but like Saturn's really in your second house. So your responsibilities are really towards also your like monetization strategy. So you're still feeling pressure to like firm up your money situation. And maybe that's causing you to, and that's giving you a little anxiety because your career, like I said, there's a financial exposure here where it's like, maybe the company's not doing well. Maybe my corporate partner is like already gone underwater. So I think you're feeling a little anxious about your career and your money picture. But some of you will have Mars, but you've been working hard because of that Mars in the sixth. But some of you will have Mars in the fifth, which is really a call to like kind of lighten up a little bit here and like have some fun creatively. So let's finish off with Pisces rising. So Pisces risings, this eclipse, you know, it could be in the 8th or the 9th. Let's go with the 9th for now, because I feel like that will be the most illuminating here. So Pisces risings, Scorpio solar eclipse usually will be in the 9th there, which could be letting go of a certain worldview. Maybe you invested in a really costly trip, or maybe you're letting go of a certain educational path that you know isn't right for you anymore. But it is opening up a new opportunity because you want to chase down a really interesting subject that you're coming across in the 3rd house on the lunar eclipse. But for other Pisces rising, there could just be a conversation that you have, like straight up, just in a mundane conversation, or like a really exciting conversation through a mundane everyday channel and circumstance. So maybe you're texting or calling or messaging someone that's like a really exciting conversation that just changes the very subjects that you want to learn, like the things you want to learn about. Because a lot of Pisces risings are having an identity crisis. You have Jupiter and Neptune in the first. Like that's like, you know, maybe sometimes feeling larger than life, but not always being anchored to something. So these eclipses are highlighting maybe the things that you can learn that will enlighten you and clarify who you are in a lot of ways. But for some of you, it will be in the 8th house and 2nd house, which means that there's a more of a financial component to this, or even something related to shadow work and psychoanalysis, where it's like I'm looking into my my shadow side a little bit more, or I'm thinking about new financial aspirations, financial goals, and how does that affect my like I think your financial picture could change around the lunar eclipse with Taurus there, like a sudden change in the income stream, and maybe there's a connection there to some shadow work that you've done. Maybe you've faced some fears and you're ready to go out there and monetize. And then, you do have Mars retrograde in the 4th, which means you're reevaluating kind of how you organize your home and family life. So in the 4th house with Mars there, you've been very busy in the home life. You've been very active and communicative with your family. But during Mars retrograde, it's almost like you're exhausted by that. Your family is getting on your nerves, or you're tired of tending to household chores. So it's like maybe you find a way to lighten that load. Like maybe you don't, sweep the floor every weekend. Maybe you do it every other week. Like you got to give yourself a little break there. I think you're just like, also when you're at home, you're just like talking a lot and you're soaking up a lot of knowledge, which is great. But here's an interesting thing with Mars Gemini. It could be a reflective process where you realize you take all the things you've been reading, because Mars Gemini can be about reading, and you figure out what you want to write about out of that. So for some Pisces risings and even Aries risings, I think there could be something around like wanting to just like write the things you've been learning. So if you've been reading a lot about astrology and you want to write an astrology book out of your home, like if you're a Pisces rising, that's the perfect time to just like write in the home. So I think you should really be focused on writing there. And by the way, what I didn't get to with the eclipses, to finish off the eclipses, Saturn is squaring the eclipses in the 12th house. I kind of think that there's a responsibility here to something spiritual, to a reflective process, and even to clearing certain foundations. So in order to make your financial life upgrade your financial life, or to even upgrade your knowledge base in something, you have to really get serious about what it is that you have faith in. Who do you have faith in? What do you have faith in? What foundations do you have here? Because Saturn in the 12th has been forcing you to let go of tons of foundations, like just tons of foundations, whether it's through a divorce or selling a house or even like a family member disappearing or something. Like there's a lot that you've been letting go. And so who's in its place though, right? Is it a God? Is it a divinity or a divine presence? Is it a creative muse? Saturn in the 12th is begging you to have a foundation in your spiritual life here, or in something to reflect. And so you want to be really clear on who that is, what that foundation is, so that you can do the shadow work, so that you can invest in the things in the value, you have the right values, the values that are best for you, that open financial opportunities, or that open learning opportunities if it's in the 9th and 3rd. So again, and you can write about a lot of stuff though, and you can still learn about a lot of stuff in the home. So again, like you keep putting energy into the home, but just be more strategic about how much energy you're burning there. And that Mars eventually will square the Sag energy in the 9th, which is, I kind of feel like, or sorry, that Sag energy in the 10th. So that will be kind of like a little bit of maybe an impulsive decision to, I don't know, like there could be a conflict with a parent, honestly. Yeah. Pisces, you could have a conflict with a parent at the end of November, or there may be something in the 4th house that like suddenly you learn about that makes you want to chase a new career, which is fine. I think that's fine. And that Mars energy though will be squaring the 1st house, which is like a little confusing. It's almost like there's like people here in the family who are triggering you and casting doubt on who you really are. It's almost like there's an identity crisis. There's a family member, pushing you a little bit of like, well, I don't think you're that. The person I know doesn't believe in astrology. Like maybe or the person that I know wants to be a doctor. Like maybe there's someone in the family like kind of like provoking you there. But it's like ironically at the end of November, like pushing you to realize what you really want to do in your career. So I think that's so it could actually be a beneficial moment for you. And did I talk about for Aquarius risings? Yes, the responsibilities towards the self, etc. So anyways, Just to kind of finish off this session. First of all, thank you for attending and watching this. You know, so for everybody, what November is really about, it's you finishing a sequence here of number one, letting go of certain behavior patterns, complexes, compulsions, and obsessions and grudges. You have to let that go and replace that and make space for very forward looking, progressive, I mean that in a general word, progressive, evolutionary relationships and mindsets. So you're clearing and detoxifying and draining out things that are really stubborn within you and deeply rooted, but like problematic, and replacing that with something that's a little bit more enlightening with Uranus. But at the same time, with Mars retrograde, you do have to reevaluate your communication style, how you approach others, how often you're talking to others. Maybe you've been talking to people too much. Maybe you've been talking on social media too much. You need to take a little bit of a breather there and reflect. I think November has a little bit of a reflective energy as well. And then how do these new value systems or this opening of making space for new relationships, how does that clash and square with your Saturn responsibilities? So everybody has responsibilities right now with Saturn that are, with Saturn being direct, it has more power. So it's like there's something here in which you are, you know, able to like think about your long-term goals. But this eclipse is almost forcing you into a little bit of a crossroads where it's like, maybe my values are so different than what I thought they were. Maybe I actually want to be free and authentic and uniquely me. And maybe that alters your sense of responsibility with Saturn there, where it's like, maybe I don't want some of these responsibilities. I'd rather have I have a different long-term goal. So basically in November, no matter what your rising sign is, you really do want to audit and evaluate what it is that you want out of life. What do you want out of life? Like, if someone asks you, what do you want? Do you have an answer? If not, then you have to start from square one there. You have to start with that. And once you're clear on what you want, your desires, your values, then it's going to be a lot easier to know who you want to collaborate with or be around, right? And those people that you let in are very, very, very transformative for you. And they will help you see all the things that you could manifest that are just radically different. So basically, November is a call to reinvent yourself, reinvent your long-term potentials, and reevaluate your communication style and get more strategic with it. So if you want to learn astrology, by the way, from me, I have a 2-hour pre-recorded lecture on my website. The link is also down below. That lecture, two hours, over 100 slides. It's all the fundamentals of astrology. And I teach it in a very digestible way that really, it gives you that foundation, a really firm foundation from which you can explore astrology as much or as little as you want, but it includes everything from the signs, the planets, the houses, the even the birth chart mechanics and how to interpret a birth chart. So it's a lot packed into 2 hours, but I'm very efficient and organized, so I can do that in 2 hours. Also, if you want a reading from me, my 2022 schedule, I'm all booked, but in 2023, of course, I will be doing readings again. And so in the next few weeks, I'll be announcing my 2023 schedule. So please look out for that. Also, subscribe to my podcast if you can. My YouTube, obviously, subscribe to that. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok as well. So thank you so much and have a good one.